What's up, my wizards? It's that man again, Dub from Mtg, along with the Ziggy. It's pretty appropriate to have Ziggy for a review of a set full of giant monsters. That's what you are, bud. But anyway, today, in case you can't tell, I'm still putting off doing this top 25. I'm going to talk about the cat instead. Honestly, this top 25, seriously, has been like the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a YouTuber. It's just, Ikoria is such a ridiculous, outrageously powerful set that just paring this down to 25 entries was a really, really tough job. Plus, this is the third time I've recorded this video today. The first time, I actually talked too long and my SD card, my camera filled all the way up. So I figured, I will just try again. So I recorded a second time. It turns out the entire time Audacity didn't recognize my microphone. So I could have used the onboard mic for my camera, but it sounds like I'm coming to you from the bottom of a dumpster. So I figured I'd record again. Here we are. Some force out there in the world doesn't want me to finish this YouTube video, but we're going to do it. Third time's a charm. Now we're going to kick things off here with an honorable mentions with an S in parentheses, because I want to talk about like 3 cards here. Because, again, I couldn't just pare it down to one honorable mention. The set is outrageous. So I'm going to spot like 3 cards here that are kind of an extension of the sleepers list. If you haven't seen that yet, go check it out. If there's some cards that didn't make this list and you don't know why, it might be because they're on the sleepers list. So, again, check that out when you're done here. But these honorable mentions here are kind of an extension of this list, but they're also cards that I thought were a little bit... They get too much attention to really make a sleepers list. So we'll start with Titan Auth Rex. I won't talk too much about this, but there is a really sweet line where you cycle this on turn 2, turn 3 some kind of mana acceleration, and then turn 4 you Bonded Revival and 11/11 Haste Trample into play, so that's probably good. So I just wanted to bring this card up. I have some hopes for it, but not incredibly high hopes. Aside from that, I like Parcel Beasts too. I've already seen this in some people's top 10s here on the site, but I have a little less faith in it while still believing it's a standard playable Magic card if nothing else. Mutating this on turn 2 and getting the stats looks pretty good, but even though the activated ability only costs 1 mana, it still knocks you off your curve for the next few turns, and that might not be worth it. You might not actually activate Parcel Beast until it turns 6 in some games. But then again, if on turn 5 you drop a land to play a 4-drop and activate Parcel Beast, it looks pretty good to me. So I can't fuss too much. It is a standard playable Magic card, but I have more reservations about it than other YouTubers might have. The other honorable mention that I want to talk about just a second here is Keep Safe. I've seen some people say this costs too much. What are you smoking? It's a really, really good card to me. It's effectively a counterspell for the tempo decks that also draws a card. It might not be Veil of Summer, it might not even be Blossoming Defense, but it's still a really nice card for the tempo decks that do want to play it, and there seem to be a few. We'll talk about that. But let's get to the actual list here with the knowledge, though, that numbers 25 through 20 are kind of just, they feel like more honorable mentions to me. These are cards that I really like subjectively, but I also think there's objective use for. That said, these happen to be cards that I don't think are going to be like tier 1 standard playable, but at the very least are good enough cards to elevate some of the decks that want them. I think a decent example of this is number 25, the Ozolith, which kind of embodies everything I was just talking about. I have no idea if this card is good. Now, I'm recording this on the same day that the early access streamer event starts, and I've already seen some people try to do crazy things with this. I will say, though, just something to keep in mind. The early access streamer event, that meta, that ain't the standard meta, son. That's not the same thing. The early access streamer meta is all like crazy brews that do insane things on turn 6, whereas the standard meta is mono red decks that kill you on turn 4 with Embercleaves, control decks that counter everything you try to do, throw Fairy down and then Dream Troll you to death, Bant decks and Sultai decks that ramp to 6 mana on turn 3 or 4. It gets pretty crazy out there in the world, so I'm not saying the Ozolith is the best card in Standard. But then again, for the next 20 years, we'll be looking at literally any creature that has counters on it and saying, does this work with the Ozolith? So, if something isn't broken with it right now, something almost certainly will be broken with it down the road. But in the meantime, we've got stuff like Walking Ballista and Hangerback Walker in Modern to play around with the Ozolith, and plenty of counterific creatures in Standard as well. So the Ozolith might have lots of stuff to do, or it might not have anything to do, but more than just about any other card on the list, this has the ability to jump from like number 25 to number 1 depending on what happens to it. I'm just not ready to say it's an amazing Magic card just yet. Now for number 24, I'm going to cheat already for the first time, that was quick, and talk about a cycle for the first time on the list, but really I'm only interested in 2 cards from the Bonder cycle, or I guess the keyword ability Deuter Cycle, right? But really, I only care about Cunning Nightbonder for obvious reasons. Put this in your flash deck and smoke it, right? I mean, this just goes into Mirror and Mono Blue Flash, maybe Sultai, whatever, Goes in Flash. It's an obvious pick, but a little more subtle than that is Trample Guy, is what I've been calling him. Proud Wild Bonder, I believe his name is, but Trample Guy is the name that sticks in my head because that's how I identify him now. But I've been playing around with this. Been doing some proxy testing in the last week or so, and one of the decks I've had some fun with is just Trample Deck. All our dudes have Trample. You're trying to get the Proud Wild Bonder on turn 4 and swing in. Sometimes, if you get the correct curve on the first 3 turns, that can lead to pushing through like 7 to 9 damage on turn 4. Guaranteed, more or less. And that means that Wild Bonder, again, with the correct start, can be like, on a level comparable to Embercleave when it comes to pushing through damage for free. And, by the way, it works pretty well with Embercleave too, because Embercleave gives the creature its Clip 2 trample. So I actually think Wild Bonder has the tiniest of chances, but if nothing else, it's a card I really like. Now, number 23 is Sprite Dragon, which is a million times better than Mountain Dew Dragon, because Mountain Dew Dragon messes up your teeth, whereas Sprite Dragon is maybe the most pushed version of a win condition for an Is It Spells deck that we've ever seen. Right? I'm still not sure that it's amazing in the face of some of the things we can do in this standard that I've already mentioned, and some of the other things that Ikoria brings to the table, right? But if you want to build an Is It Spells deck, this is probably the thing that's going to win you the game like 9 times out of 10. So Sprite Dragon deserves a spot on the list. Now, at number 22, I've got another 2-mana flyer. This one I like a little bit more because I love the deck that it goes in. We're going to talk about Skycat Sovereign for the briefest of moments because I don't think this elevates the Blue-White Flyers deck to like Tier 1 viability on day 1 or anything, but it is exactly the kind of card that deck needed. Not only is it a flyer that scales and gets bigger as the game goes on, it's very likely going to be the biggest creature you have on the table at any given time, and Flyers needed one more like relatively big creature instead of all the little like 1 and 2/2 guys that it's got. So that was important, but it also needed a mana sink in case it draws dead or goes later into the game than it wants to. Boom, problem solved. On 2 different axes, this card does things for that deck. So again, I don't think that it's going to be like the best deck in the format or anything, but it definitely got a huge leg up from this card, so it deserves a spot on my list. Now, numbers 21 and 20 are both low rarity reprints, so take a moment to guess what those might be. Number 21, Cathartic Reunion. I gave you an extra little second there to suss it out, but Cathartic Reunion is the first of these low rarity reprints that I think is really impactful. It's just better than Tormenting Voice in most cases on day 1. Decks that want to jumpstart cards, decks that want to reanimate creatures, decks that want to escape creatures, decks that want to play Arclight Phoenix, all love Cathartic Reunion. So it's definitely going to see some amount of play. It almost always does. It still sees Modern play to this day. And usually if cards see play in Modern, they probably see play in Standard. So not always, right? But we've already seen what Cathartic Reunion can do in a Standard environment. And I'd argue it has even more to do in this environment than it did the last time that we saw it. But at number 20, the other low rarity reprint is Essence Scatter. And I seriously have the compulsion to put this card in my top 10. If we're talking about cards that are going to affect Standard play specifically, a reprint of Essence Scatter is huge. We already had Essence Capture, but it's really difficult to cast in multicolored decks. And this is much, much easier. And well, honestly, you can even play 6 copies of it if you want to. You can play 2 captures, 4 scatters if you wanted to. But I doubt that's going to happen. I see a 2 or 3 of Essence Scatter in a lot of tempo decks playing blue, be they, control decks or these flash decks that we will bring up a lot as we go through this video. But either way, I see a ton of decks packing blue wanting to play Essence Scatter. And even though it kind of feels like the fun police, it also kind of feels like the card that needs to exist in this format. Now, number 19 is a card that I almost talked myself out of putting on this list at all, but honestly, I can't help but just love the King of Kongs right here. If you haven't seen the movie, by the way, the King of Kongs, go watch it. After you do this and watch the Sleepers video, go watch King of Kongs. Great movie. But in any case, the actual King of Kongs, old Kogla over here, is a really good creature. I think it's somewhere in between Feasting Troll King and Carnage Tyrant in terms of playability, and that's a pretty good little sweet spot to be in. No matter what you're playing against, it does something. Aggro or mid-range, kill a creature when it enters the battlefield. If you're playing against some kind of combo deck, blow up one of their important artifacts or enchantments. Fires of Invention or Witch's Oven or something. Very important when it swings in. But if you're playing against some kind of control deck that has sweepers and spot removal, and if you got a couple of humans laying around, you can give it indestructible. And so it just does something against everything. So in the end, I talked myself back into putting this card on the list. Now, at number 18, I'm going to talk about Voracious Great Shark. I like this card probably more than I should. But, I mean, I've seen it on Commander top 10 lists already, amazingly. But I think this card is, again, really impactful for the standard environment. Voracious Great Shark just be waiting to jump up and snap their spell off the stack and drag it into the briny deep, you know. And then on subsequent turns, swing in for a whole bunch of damage. One thing the Flash decks didn't have access to, especially the decks that don't play green and thus don't have Nightpack Ambusher. But one thing they didn't have access to was a good finishing creature that does a lot of damage in one bite. And this can finish off the game in just a couple of swings if you've taken some points off of your opponent's life total. So a giant Frilled Mystic is probably playable. But speaking of the Flash decks, number 17 is Slitter Wisp, which is probably better than number 17, honestly. This is another one of the cards I've been testing around with. I'm just testing different Flash decks. And this goes in like all of them. This is exactly what Flash needed. Although it's still not the best tool that Flash got. It's still the card advantage engine that Flash has been dreaming of since that deck entered the standard environment like a year and a half ago. It's exactly what the deck wanted. And don't discount the life your opponent is losing when you cast Flash spells either. It's actually important, because you're playing a lot of creatures like Brineborn Cutthroat. You might play Fairy Vandal, Frilled Mystic, and whatnot. And some of these creatures just kind of like tick points off your opponent's life total. So this can be a form of reach if you're casting enough spells with Flash, or especially if you have multiple copies of it in play at the same time. That's really nice. But I mean, again, if you have multiple copies, the card draw is out of this world. The real draw to this, if you'll pardon the pun, is the card advantage engine, something that Flash sorely lacked and now has, making it an extremely dangerous deck. Now, number 16 is a card that I was sure was going to be in my top 10, but I've been testing the Cycling deck too, and honestly, Unpredictable Cyclone hasn't impressed me as much as I wanted it to, but it's still a card that wins you the game when you untap with it in play. If you've got fresh mana to cycle cards with, and obviously cycling cards in your hand, this card can do some really broken things, but it usually doesn't come down until turn 5, and you have to say go and hope your opponent doesn't blow it up, which is easier said than done. But again, you do untap with an Unpredictable Cyclone in play, and you got some cyclers in your hand, you got a long way towards winning that game, kid, because you're going to get a whole bunch of value off of Cyclone. Imagine turns where you cycle a Yadaro, and Yadaro just happens to be the only creature in your deck, so you're guaranteed to slam an 8/8 Trample Haste onto the battlefield. Maybe Yadaro should have been in this slot instead of Cyclone, but Cyclone is still sort of the win condition for the cycling decks, and it does its job admirably as long as you can get to it. Now, at number 15, we got Mythos of Nethroi. It's the only Mythos on the list. I've already told you, I'm going to be doing a lot of like cycles within one entry in this list. I didn't feel like I had to do that with the Mythos. Not many of them impressed me much. Like Shania Twain said, was that Shania Twain? I am old. I think that was back in the 90s. But anyway, they don't impress me much, is what I'm trying to say. But I'm more than willing to be wrong on most of the Mythos cycle, but this one is pretty obviously the most powerful of all of them. 3 mana to destroy target non-land permanent just is playable in multiple formats. This will see play in Commander and Standard if nothing else, but it could see play beyond even that. Now here at number 14, let's talk about Drannith Magistrate. It's probably just a sideboard card in terms of Standard, possibly even Modern, possibly Legacy. I've heard talk that this is Legacy playable, but somehow this hasn't been banned in Commander yet. I can see how it wouldn't be, because like in a 4 or 8 player game, someone's going to kill Drannith Magistrate, and you can go back to playing your commanders again, right? So it's probably not as impressive in that format as I think it is, but Magistrate looks like one of the better sideboard cards in all of Standard, sort of the Tocatli Honor Guard of this season, and Tocatli Honor Guard was great. Now, obviously the cards do completely different things, but this hoses, adventure creatures. They can't play them out of exile. They can't play Euros and Croxes out of their graveyard, and just those 2 applications are enough to make this an all-star sideboard card. Not to mention any other value that you might get off of this, by the way. They can't play cards off the top of their library with Bolas' Citadel, or Experimental Frenzy, or the new Vivian. They can't play, stuff that they got with Robber of the Rich, Thief of Sanity, or Ashiok when they do her ultimate. There's a lot of things that this hoses. I just want to spell out a lot of them for you. Now, at number 13, I have Luminous Brood Mop, and it is taking everything within me to not make this my number 1 card. I expected this to be good. And then I thought about it, and I was like, it's probably not as good as I think. And then I tested with it. It turns out it's amazing. It does so much. In just a basic aggro deck, without actually even building around this card, if you make it your 4-drop, suddenly you can swing with your little dudes like way more liberally because you don't care if they die. They're going to come back with flying and untapped, so you don't have to worry about any kind of crackback you might have otherwise been exposed to. So just in a regular aggro deck, good 4-drop without even building around it. But once you do start building around it, in like an Aristocrats deck, it's freaking unbelievable. You know, you're sacrificing stuff to Woe Strider, Priest of Forgotten Gods, and you're getting them right back in a better form, right? They're getting flying. That's insane. Plus, combined with things like Tithe Taker and Orzhov Enforcer, you get the creature right back with flying plus an Afterlife token. If the creature dies again, you get another Afterlife token. It's next to broken with Afterlife creatures. So this is just a really, really stupid Magic card that works in Aristocrats decks, combo decks, in Commander, and just like basic aggro decks. It does literally everything. It's a very good Magic card. Let's go ahead and move on to number 12 here, which I've just got labeled as Planeswalkers. The one that I'm least excited for is Luca. I guess you can be on the list, Luca. That polymorph ability looks good, but honestly, I'm a lot more excited for Narset. Let's go ahead and point her out real quick. Didn't like this card at first, but the more I think about it, the more I think that like drawing a card, killing a dude, and then dumping a card for advantage, probably just a good second ability. Plus, it's ramp if you need ramp, and you might need ramp if you're trying to play like Ultimatums. So I mean, don't sneeze at that first ability, but it's mostly the second ability I'm interested in here, and it looks pretty freaking good to me. But as far as Planeswalkers in this set, I think Vivier is far and away the best one. Don't get hung up on the 3 loyalty here. That is what I see most people comment on, is that this is bad because it has 3 loyalty. I think that is a woeful mistake to make because, first of all, this makes creatures with its +1. You get a choice of keyword abilities. That's pretty good. You get another kind of polymorph ability similar to Luca's, but this one is, I think, in some ways better. You know, you don't have to lose a creature. You play a creature, you get another creature. That's a lot of board presence. I like that. But the best thing about this, easy, is the sort of experimental frenzy light passive ability on it. Even if it's only got 1 loyalty, right? You're still going to be able to just like play creatures off the top of your library. In a deck where you're playing mostly creatures, this can do, again, an impression of experimental frenzy. You play 3 creatures in the same turn. And that's unbelievable card advantage, especially in green. So I think this is actually a really good Planeswalker. Might have to wait until Vivier or Lily. Why do I keep messing it up? Might have to wait until Nissa exit the format to be a good card, but it might not even have to wait that long. This kind of card advantage is actually amazing in a color that usually doesn't get access to this kind of card advantage. Now, number 11 sort of functions as, ostensibly, an honorable mention for the top 10. So in that spirit, I wanted to take this spot to talk about Triomes, because Triomes are like maybe gonna end up being like the most played cards in the set. At the end of the day, you know, you're gonna play them in Standard, you're gonna play them in Commander, and some modern decks might play 1 to 2 copies of these in finely tuned mana bases. Did I qualify that last statement enough? But either way, you're gonna see play in Standard, Commander, possibly Historic and Pioneer even. So lots and lots of play on an obviously good Magic card. And I don't have to say too much about the Triomes, but I also didn't really want to waste a top 10 slot on Tri-lands, if that makes any sense. But let's officially crack the top 10, y'all. We did it. We made it. We're in the top 10 now. And this is where we're really going to start talking about a whole bunch of cycles in a row. So please don't get mad at me. Again, I have to do it this way, or else we're going to be here for like 3 days. It'll be a 3-day long video. And obviously my SD card isn't big enough for that. I've just learned. So at number 10, the Apex Legends. But obviously I like some of these more than others. But the Apex Legends have an advantage over some of the other cycles in the set in that I don't hate any of them whatsoever. I think that Brokos is okay, but you know, not necessarily super impressive. But the ability to keep coming back over and over is obviously pretty dumb, so it might be a really good card. But Vadrok also looks amazing to me, even if you don't mutate it. Looks like a pretty straight Magic card in terms of just like stats to converted mana cost. That you could do a lot worse. But when you do mutate it, it's card advantage, kid. But so is Illuna. Illuna's great stats in terms of the CMC that you're paying for it. But if you do get to mutate it, you get card advantage alongside it, and along with something that like helps you scry or otherwise fix the top of your deck, this could be really very dangerous. So keep that in mind. But as far as the Apex Legends, I think I like Snapdax the most. This is one of those that I've also tested a good bit with. And Snapdax, when mutated, is unbelievable. But even if you don't mutate it, a 4-mana 3/5 double strike is surprisingly effective on stats alone. When you do mutate it, though, it feels like a better Siege Rhino that can actually like target creatures too. It's just an unbelievable card. It feels kind of like a better Enter the God Eternals too, in a way. So it's just, you know, an Enter the God Eternals that attacks even more effectively. If you mutate something bigger than a 3/5 in terms of power onto it, obviously the double strike ability gets better. So I really, in case you can't tell, I really like me some Snapdax. But I guess the dream is to play the Abzan one, Nethroi, and actually mutate it. Seems dumb to me, but if I had to pick a best one in the cycle, at least from personal experience so far, I think Snapdax is the one that has the most chance to break out. But again, there has to be a Mardu deck for that, and I'm not sure that there really is. Now at number 9, I'm going to be a little bit subversive and say that I actually think the Legendary Human cycle is by and large better than the Mutate cycle. They all cost less to actually play, and in most cases they have amazing abilities, but there are 2 of these that I like kind of above the other 3. Yes, I do like Winota. I like Winota a lot. Played with this card. Good, but sometimes can whiff. On 3 triggers, it can whiff, so that'd be a problem. But the 2 that I really like are Cheville. Let's start with this card. I think this is almost a sleeper. This is one of those that's gotten a little bit too much attention. It's been on too many lists. It's been on too many sleepers lists to even call a sleeper anymore. But I do think this is still one that people aren't taking seriously enough. It's going to perform really admirably against all the mono red decks where it blocks all of their 1 and 2 drops really effectively, but can also take out bigger creatures thanks to the Death Touch. If it has to die, that's fine, but let's say that something swings in, you block with Shovel, and both creatures die. Well, if the creature that you blocked had a bounty counter on it, you also draw a card. It's not terrible, so, you know, I'll take that, but at the same time, you're in a color combination that has no problem blowing permanents up, creatures or planeswalkers. So I can see plenty of situations where you end up drawing 2 cards in a given game off of Cheville before they can do anything about it, and you've probably gone a long way towards winning the game if you can pull that off. Turn this into a card advantage engine, and it's an unbelievable card, but even if it's just sitting on the battlefield waiting to block, kind of ain't half bad in that case either. But moving on, I think the best of the human legend cycle is probably General Kudro, if I had to guess. And he's got plenty of friends, please get that joke, but if he does have a couple of buds out, then he can always sacrifice some small creatures to blow up big creatures, and that's good, period. But if you're playing like an Aristocrats type strategy and you got Cruel Celebrants or something out, you can obviously get extra value off of sacking your dudes. Plus, this can also just snipe like Euros and Croxes out of graveyards. I like that ability, and if that weren't enough, you get an Anthem effect for all your duders. So, as long as you're playing nothing but humans, and I feel like that's not actually too hard in the upcoming Standard. Kudro looks great to me, not only in Standard, but also in, like, Commander, where this seems like a pretty sweet 3-mana Commander, right? So, I think that Kudro has a bright future ahead of him and will do a lot in a lot of formats. Now, at number 8, I'm just going to say Companions, but there's really only, like, 3 of these that I love. Starting with Karuga the Macrosage, which I think is the best of these, and has the best chance of going into decks as a companion on day 1. Some of these it's really hard to fulfill the condition for, but in Bant and possibly even Sultai decks, all you got to do is cut Growth Spiral, and you've pretty much met the condition for this being your companion. Same thing with Fires of Invention decks. Fires doesn't even have to play 2-drops at all. At least the Bant decks, cutting Growth Spiral is like a serious problem, kind of. You could argue that. You really don't want to cut Growth Spiral. But in Fires, there's really not that much that you have to cut that you'll miss that much to make the companion requirement on this. And then suddenly, once you get your Fires down in your 5th land, you've got a free card advantage engine that procs off of pretty much everything in your entire deck, which is exactly the kind of thing Fires wants. So I think Macrosage is just like nuts. It's just banana nut bread. It's a very good Magic card, but also like Lurrus, even though it doesn't look like a great companion, it could be a companion. Doesn't look like a great one. I don't love the concession, but just playing it in the 60 and just getting it onto the battlefield is probably really, really good card advantage over the course of a couple of turns. So Lurrus, which I've already played with a few times, because it looks like Lurrus and one other companion are going to form the basis of the first deck that we do this season. It looks like the patrons have already voted it through, but either way, you'll see a Lurrus deck very, very soon here on the channel. It's a good card, but so is, amazingly, the Boros Fox thing that I always forget the name of. His name is Zerda. I had to look it up real quick, but I kind of missed how good this card was the first time I previewed it. I was just thinking about it in context of Standard, but in Commander, this card is ludicrous, to the point that if I only had to talk about 3 companions, which is exactly what I'm doing, I'm going to talk about this. There are other ones that I like Garuda. I really like that one, but honestly, if you're talking about Commander, Zerda's probably the most broken of all of these. Pretty easily. You get infinite mana from Basalt Monolith and Grim Monolith. That seems good. So, just for that one trick, Zerda has to be brought up. But honestly, if I had to pick one that I like more than all the others, it's almost certainly Karuga, which definitely will certainly almost no questions asked do things in the Standard environment and beyond. But at number 7, let's talk about these ultimatums for a second. Now, again, there's only 3 of these that I really like. Now, the Abzan one I love, don't get me wrong. It wouldn't be one that I focus too much on because I think it's mostly a commander card and not much else. But it's obviously a win in command. If you play this, you probably win your commander game. So it's a good card. But there are 3 that I like more than that. Starting with Genesis Ultimatum, which might force the Fires decks to go Teamer. They don't have to. You can always just fish a copy of this out of your sideboard with a Fae of Wishes or something. If you're not, if you're still playing Jeskai Fires, but if you are playing Teamer Fires, getting a 7 mana lets you just fire this off appropriately, and you're probably going to hit literally 5 things because it also counts lands. I like that it's one of the only ultimatums that pays for itself. Technically, the Abzan one can too because it can get lands out of your yard, so keep that in mind. But this one can also just throw untapped lands onto the battlefield. That's not bad, but mostly you're looking to get huge stuff. I like so much about Genesis Ultimatum, but I like a little bit more about Inspired Ultimatum, or Inspiring Ultimatum. It's Inspired Ultimatum. I always forget which tense or which conjugation we're using. But either way, the Jeskai one looks way better to me than it does to a vast majority of Magic players. I think a lot of people are underrating this. Being able to just reload by 5 cards is the best part of this, and I think that people forget how good a 5-card draw is. But at the same time, you're probably killing the biggest thing on the other side of the table and catching back up in the life game, right? So that could be huge if you ever get the chance to play it, and the Jeskai decks that want to play it can play it at instant speed if they have its a Fairy Time Raveler out. So yeah, the Jeskai Ultimatum looks amazing in a vacuum, but especially once you put it into context, it looks even better to me in this Standard environment. So, love this card, but if I had to pick one that I actually like the most, seriously, it's the Mardu one. Again, just like, Snapdax, the Mardu Apex Predator, this has to have a deck to go in. Right? There has to be a Mardu mid-range deck or a Mardu control deck of some kind that actually gets to play this card. And I don't know that there is, but at the same time, this is at least a ridiculous commander card, if nothing else. And it's another card that if you are playing Fires in Standard, you don't even have to play playing Mardu. Just go fetch it up with a Fae of Wishes out of your board and then blow up everything and win the game. More than any of the other ultimatums. I feel like this one has the fewest whiff clauses, right? Your opponent might not have anything on their side of the battlefield other than lands, but if that's the case, you're probably doing pretty well for yourself, kid. Congratulations. If they do have some things, this could be way better than a Casualties of War for just 1 more mana, so it looks like an incredibly playable Standard card to me. There's got to be a deck for it. But at number 6, this is the last time I'm just going to talk about a whole cycle, so that's good, right? You're probably mad at me by now. But again, I had to do this. But at number 6, I'm just going to say 3-color enchantments, right? But again, just like all the other ones, there are some I like more than others. Mardu especially got the shaft. Mardu may have done better when it came to the other 3-color cycles in this set. Mardu got some of the more powerful cards. So I understand why Mardu maybe got shafted, but it certainly did. This still looks like a good card. Offspring's Revenge does, but nowhere near the level of the other enchantments. Even Death's Oasis just kind of looks cute, but there's probably a lot of combo potential. That said, I don't think it's as good as the other enchantments, like Whirlwind of Thought. This looks amazing when you untap with it in play, especially in Commander, where it's very likely you just cast like 6 or 8 spells, get the card advantage award for that turn cycle, and just end up closing the game out. But more than that, I think I like Song of Creation. I think that's, was it Anthony Trancucci on Twitter? I'm trying to remember which of you it was on my Twitter that said like, oh, it's cute they think discarding your hand is a downside. I couldn't have put it better myself. Discarding your hand can easily be turned into an upside, especially in a format with a bunch of escape creatures and ways to reanimate stuff, ways to use your graveyard. It really shouldn't be hard to turn Song of Creation's downside into kind of the best part of the card. But whenever you play a spell, draw 2 cards is maybe the actual best line of text I've ever seen on a Magic card. So this is maybe the best of this cycle. But amazingly, there's another enchantment in this cycle that I think could possibly be even better, and that's Titan's Nest. This could actually be the best card in the set, nay, the best card we've seen in a set in many sets. I'm telling you, the card looks straight dangerous to me for what it can do. This effectively just gives every spell that you cast for the rest of the game Delve. And remember when Dig Through Time got banned? Remember when Treasure Cruise got banned? Remember when Gurmag Angler dominated Pauper for like a year? Yeah, it's because Delve is a stupid broken ability. So giving all of your spells Delve, what could go wrong? This actually looks like it might be a broken card. And they tried to balance it a little bit, and again, it's so cute the way they tried to balance it. Oh, you can't cast a Hydroid Krasis or a Walking Ballista with this. Tough titty. Can't cast an Ulamog with this. Oops. I don't care. It's still ridiculous. I can still cast an Agent of Treachery for 2 mana with this card, so yeah, it's on the list, and honestly, it could easily be the best card in the set. But at number 5 here, let's talk about Shark Typhoon, finally. This is another card that's like a lot of people's number 1 card in the set, and I can definitely see why, for meta reasons. And just in terms of like in a vacuum, the card looks good. But I actually don't love the enchantment half of this. 6 mana is an awful lot, and it's another enchantment you kind of have to untap with fresh mana to be able to actually use properly, but if you ever do, it's very nuts. This is a nuts card if you actually get the full value out of the enchantment part of it, but I'm actually more interested in the cycling half of it, especially in a format with Teferi Time Raveler, because cycling ain't casting spells, son. Not at all. At the end of your opponent's turn, you can cycle this, draw a card, and get like a 5/5 flyer and kill their Teferi on your next attack step. That seems really good, and we've been wanting cards that combat Teferi effectively for like a year now. We finally got what looks like maybe the best way to deal with Teferi in the whole format. So the card sees play on day 1 for no other reason than that. But honestly, just being able to cycle and get like a pseudo Hydroid Krasis, right? Like a 4/4 that draws you a card is obviously pretty sweet too. So I just like so much about this card, and the flexibility goes a long way too. But here we are at number 4, and it's a card that I never expected to be number 4. In a million years. I really didn't expect Sea Dasher Octopus to impress me as much as it has, but I've remade this list like 8-10 times at this point, and this one just keeps creeping up. It was out of the top 10 at first, but the more I get a chance to play test with it, and again, the more times I rewrite the list, the higher up this thing goes. I think more than any other card, Slither Wisp notwithstanding, this helps out the Flash decks. I've said a few times that there are cards in this list that propel decks into playability, but not necessarily tier 1 playability. Well, between this, Slither Wisp, Voracious Great Shark, I think that Flash is immediately day 1 tier 1, right? And this is probably, again, even with Slither Wisp floating around, I think this is probably the best new tool that the Flash and Tempo decks got. You flash it in with Mutate, yes, you can do that. On an unblocked attacker, you're guaranteed to draw a card. A Curious Obsession with Flash is well worth the extra mana that you're paying for it. And usually, it's going to grow a creature in the same way Curious Obsession did when you put it on a Spectral Sailor, a Healer's Hawk, or some other 1-drop. It's effectively going to give the creature +1/+1 the same way Obsession did, but your creature's never going to die to not being able to attack. That's a pretty good trade-off right there, as is the instant speed ability of the card, and the flexibility of just being able to play it as a creature if you got nothing else to do, or if you just got your board swept or something. Curious Obsession could never be a 2-mana 2/2 that draws a card when it attacks or when it gets through. So, I mean, this has it all over Curious Obsession, even though it's double the casting cost. But in formats where we can play Curious Obsession, like Historic and Pioneer, you'll probably just play 4 of that and 4 of this and have the best deck in the format, son. So I think this goes beyond standard play into some of the other sort of standard light or modern light, really, formats. But again, this could see play in modern for all I know, but I kind of doubt that. If anything, I think that this is an unbelievable addition to the Flash decks in standard. And honestly, with all the new tools it got, Flash is fash. Flash is fash. It has an authoritarian stranglehold on the format on day one, and I'm pretty sure that's going to bear out in large part because of this card. But hey, we made it. We've officially cracked the top 3, everybody. Hope you're ready for it, because number 3 is some exciting stuff. It's 2-mana removal. I'm sorry, but these cards are both just so formative to the next standard environment and beyond that format too. I'm talking about Historic and Pioneer as well. They have to have really high spots on the list, both Heartless Act and Dire Tactics. Dire Tactics is definitely the worst of these 2 cards because it's a lot harder to cast and it requires a human to get the full value out of it. But even if you don't have a human, you'll be more than happy to target an Anax with this, exile it forever so they don't get any value, and only take 3 to the face rather than take like 1,000,000 to the face because they just put an Embercleave on Anax. That's probably still worth the trade, but this just gets rid of anything, exiles it. And there's a couple of cool tricks you can do with Dire Tactics where, let's say they play their turn 3 Eero, and while its ability is on the stack, before it sacrifices itself, you can Dire Tactics it and exile it away forever. There are a lot of really cool tricks with Dire Tactics, but I think that Heartless Act is just the way better card. It's much, much easier to cast, and far more decks can actually play the card. We haven't had a good, like, Doomblade variant since, like, Cast Down. And we really missed Cast Down a lot in this format, along with things like Go for the Throat. You know, these kind of Doomblade variants are always highly valued and in some ways very formative to a standard environment. And I think that's going to be very much the case with Heartless Act. I think Heartless Act is, like, no joke, one of the best cards in the set, and I don't really think that's super controversial. But number 2 might be a little controversial because I've said before, I try to weigh cards for all formats, and number 2 is a card that I think might only truly be very good in Standard, but at the same time, I think it's going to be unbelievably good in Standard. Number 2 is Gem Razer. Do not sleep on this card. Like, I can't call this a sleeper because it is getting a fair amount of press at time of writing, but at the same time, I don't think people are taking it seriously enough. We've heard a lot about how you can mutate a Parcel Beast on turn 2. You can mutate like a Migratory Greathorn on turn 2, which those are good plays, yes. But if you're going to mutate something onto your Arboreal Grazer or your Gilded Goose on turn 2, it should probably be this one. Even if you're not blowing up a Witch's Oven or something like that, it's still an unbelievable card because you, sir or madam, now have a 4/4 with trample on turn 2, so you don't even have to blow something up. But obviously, once the game gets a little bit longer in the tooth, you can blow up Fires of Inventions, Ember Cleaves and stuff that are still on the table, Banishing Lights and other enchantments like that, Fires of Invention. I think I may have already said that. I'm just very excited. This is a ridiculous Magic card in terms of standard Magic in general. But again, even if you don't blow something up, it's crazy on turn 2, and it's pretty easy to get it on turn 2. So I think Gem Razer is actually going to be like one of the big breakout standard cards of the set, and you might not see it coming, but now you should. Trust me, Gem Razer is an unbelievable Magic card, and it's 1,000,000 times better than Thrashing Brontodon. Do not compare it to Thrashing Brontodon. It is better. Whew, a little bit of a rant there. Gem Razer is not getting the credit it deserves. It looks like easily one of the most ludicrous cards in the set to me. I just wanted to point out how good it is. It seriously is number 2 on my list. It should be. It deserves to be. Seriously. I will not go back on that statement. But anyway, I got to do number 1, but you know what it is. It's Fiend Artisan, right? You knew number 1 was Fiend Artisan. And no, this card isn't, I don't think, overhyped. I know there are a lot of cool kids on the internet right now being like, Fiend Artisan's actually bad. That's my take. And like, you're wrong. I mean, like, you just are objectively wrong on this one. I'm not sure that Fiend Artisan is going to do everything you think it's going to do, but it's definitely going to do a whole bunch of garbage, right? Like, not only in Standard, but Historic, Pioneer, Modern possibly, and Commander almost certainly. The card is incredibly easy to cast, even in 3-color decks, thanks to the hybrid cost. That was very considerate. It's also really easy to cast in monocolored decks, obviously, whether you're playing mono black or mono green. And it does really cool things for both of those decks, whether you're trying to get like sacrifice synergies going on, or you're trying to put together a combo of some kind. Card's really good at doing that, but maybe my favorite thing about it, even more so than the I loathe to call it this, the birthing pod ability, is the Lurgoyf ability. This is kind of like the best card they've printed with Undergrowth, which is ironic because, like, I mean, it's not really, it doesn't really have Undergrowth, but, you know, in the Ravnica block, they printed a whole mechanic about having creatures in your yard, and we now see the best card they could have possibly printed, only it's not actually an Undergrowth card, right? But still, there's just so many effective ways to fill your graveyard that this could easily be like a 6/6 on turn 3, and I'm not joking, right? Turn 1, Merfolk Secret Keeper targeting yourself. Turn 2, Fiend Artisan. Turn 3, I don't know, like Gorging Vulture or something else to put cards in your yard, and you could have like a 7/7 Fiend Artisan on turn 3. It's not hard. It's not hard. So, again, I've been testing with this one. And really, the meat and potatoes of this card is the sort of birthing pod-esque ability. That's very, very impressive. But seriously, do not discount this thing's ability to grow even faster than a Tarmogoyf. I am serious. People have been saying Tarmogoyf's the better card in terms of like getting it to a high power toughness ratio in the early game. I'm not convinced of that. I have seen turn 3 7/7 Fiend Artisans already in my playtesting. So this card is just absolutely bonkers in every way. And just, oh my god. If you think Fiend Artisan is bad, you're only saying that to be contrarian. This is easily the most pushed card in the set, and I don't think that's controversial. I think it's just obvious. As a matter of fact, I think that Fiend Artisan is so pushed that it is a tier or 2 or 3 above just about every other card in the set, and the set is full of ludicrous magic cards, so that should tell you how good I think Fiend Artisan actually is. It's going to form the basis of tons of decks in Standard, and again, beyond that, because this card looks just kind of like a mistake. Just like I said about Titan's Nest, this could easily be a mistake. Well, I guess we'll have to see, but this is maybe one of the better looking magic cards we've seen in many, many sets. So keep that in mind. Yes, Fiend Artisan is good. What a take, right? But to some people, that is a take. I don't get it. But one way or the other, we're done with this list. Just make sure you let me know what I missed down there in the comments section. Again, I could have done a top 100. So there's bound to be like 20 cards you wanted me to talk about that I couldn't talk about. So get at me down there. Let me know what they are. And of course, check out the Sleepers video just to make sure that anything you maybe wanted me to cover isn't on that list. It could be. But either way, give me your picks for top cards in the format or in the set down there in the comments section. Let me know how we did. And like the video. Even if you didn't like it. Even if you thought this was a terrible list. Like the video. Help me out. Don't be vindictive. Like the video. Aside from that, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. We're going to start doing deck techs as soon as tomorrow. And the patrons have picked out a really good one for the first deck of the season. You want to make sure you get that one in your recommended feed. So hit the subscribe, then hit the bell for the notifications. Aside from that, go to the Patreon, link in the description, or patreon.com/SBMTG. The most important part of my pitch in this entire video is to tell you to go to this Patreon. It helps me out more than anything you can possibly do, and it's the only way I can make a living off of what I do here. And I really enjoyed doing it. I want to keep doing it. So $1 a month is all I ask. Hit the link in the description, and that $1 a month will help you vote on what decks we do throughout the entirety of this Standard season. Pretty good deal for $1 a month. So check that out if you feel like it. And then, I guess the last thing I have to say is that if you want to pre-order any of this stuff from the list, first link in the description will take you over to my dudes at TCG Player. You order anything through that link, helps me out. So do that if you feel like it as well. But I guess I'm done. I guess I'm actually done. I think that took less than 2 hours. The first video took 2 hours. So, but I think we actually pulled it off this time. Am I actually going to be able to get this video on the internet? Please, I hope. But anyway, I'm done. Just let me know how you felt about it and any other stuff you want to know about Ikoria down there. Get at me. What decks you want to see this season? I'm interested. Just holler at me. I'll be down there. But I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.